They dressed Mira Caldris in a wedding gown no one expected her to survive. Not because she was loved, because the Auren Dragon Court needed someone to stand in the first flame before the real bride entered. The gown had been made for Lady Seressa Vain, all white ember silk and pearl clasps, but on Mira, it hung loose at the shoulders and tight around the ribs. A seamstress pinned the back while 2 dragon guards watched the door. She did not run. Running would only let them drag her. Queen Mother Isolde Auren stood before the mirror, elegant in black gold, her silver hair pinned beneath a widow's crown of dragon bone. She looked at Mira's reflection with the calm mercy of a woman arranging flowers on a grave. "Lift your chin," Isolde said. "A false bride should still honor the court she serves." Mira met her eyes in the glass. "If I am false, why does the fire need my body?" The seamstress froze. Isolde smiled. "Because law is more patient than fear, child. The Ember Crown must taste a bride before it accepts a queen. Lady Seressa's bloodline is too valuable to risk during the first flame." Lady Seressa did not protest. She only lowered her lashes, protected even from the shame of needing another woman to suffer first. "And mine is not," Mira said. "Yours has already been purchased." The words landed without cruelty in her voice. That made them worse. Beyond the bridal chamber, bells began to toll across Auren Dragon Court. Not wedding bells, trial bells. Every woman in the servant halls knew that difference. Wedding bells rang high and silver. Trial bells rang low like iron dragged across stone. Mira closed her hands in the silk. She had scrubbed the Ember Chapel floors since she was 13. She had polished the dragon statues until their obsidian mouths reflected candlelight. She had watched noble brides pass through the gold doors with flowers in their hair and fear hidden under perfume. None of them had ever looked at her. Now they had dressed her as one of them because the crown sometimes consumed the first bride who touched it. Dragon King Vaelor Auren waited in the chapel below. He had signed the substitution order. The order had named her debt-cleared servant substitute, not bride, not woman, not Mira Caldris, but his mark still sat at the bottom. Ink did not become innocent because another hand had written the lie above it. When the guards led her into the Ember Chapel, every noble turned. The real chosen queen, Lady Seressa, stood beside the altar, in a crimson veil, untouched by the cold. She was beautiful in the way court women were trained to be beautiful, still expensive, and protected by other people's suffering. Lady Seressa's gloved fingers touched the crimson veil once, not in prayer but as if checking that something beneath it remained hidden. At the far end, Vaelor rose from the ash throne. The Dragon King wore black ceremonial armor traced with living gold fire. His dark hair framed a face cut sharp by command, and his ember eyes held the room without effort. When those eyes found Mira, something flickered. Recognition, perhaps, or discomfort. Not enough. Queen Mother Isolde spoke before that flicker could become dangerous. "Your Majesty, the court presents the lawful substitute bride for the first crown flame." Vaelor's jaw tightened. "She has a name." For one breath, Mira hated that the words reached her. A name spoken too late was not protection. It was only proof that he had known how to say it all along. Isolde bowed slightly. "All servants have names, my son. Law does not require us to endanger them by using one in a royal trial." The chapel accepted that answer. Vaelor did not sit. What did she receive for this duty? Mira almost laughed. Duty, as if a chain sounded softer when polished. Isolde's eyes cooled. Her family debt has been cleared. Her room in the lower wing has been emptied. Her service mark has been transferred. The law has paid her. Mira looked at Vaelor. The law paid everyone except the woman wearing the gown. A murmur passed through the nobles. Vaelor looked at her fully then. For one breath, the chapel was not watching a false bride. It was watching a king decide whether one servant girl's humiliation mattered more than a court built on old fire. His voice lowered. "The substitution law is cruel." Hope moved through Mira before she could stop it. Then he finished. "But it is law." The hope died so quietly, no one heard it. And that was worse than indifference. Indifference would not have seen the knife. Vaelor had seen it and still called the handle lawful. Mira held his gaze. "Then do not call this a marriage trial. Call it what it is." Isolde's smile thinned. "And what is it, girl?" Mira turned toward the altar where the Ember Crown floated above a basin of dragon fire, dark gold, thorned, beautiful and hungry. A place where noble women are protected by poor women's bones. The chapel went silent. Vaelor flinched. Not much. Enough for Mira to hate that she noticed. Isolde lifted one hand. "Proceed." 2 guards guided Mira to the altar. The Ember Crown lowered toward her hands. Heat rolled across her skin, but she did not step back. She would not give them the pleasure of seeing fear bow where dignity still stood. The crown touched her palms. The dragon fire inside the basin turned black. Lady Seressa's crimson veil fluttered, though no wind touched it. Is that supposed to happen? Isolde's face went still. Remove the substitute. But the Ember Crown would not release Mira. Its black fire curled around her fingers, then changed. The fire did not climb her arms like hunger. It circled her wrists like something measuring a pulse it had expected to find dead. Gold bloomed through the metal like dawn, breaking inside a wound. The chapel filled with a sound like a dragon drawing its first breath. Vaelor stepped down from the throne shock, cutting through his command. The crown rose from Mira's hands and turned toward Lady Seressa. The gold vanished. The thorns blackened, and the Ember Crown hissed one word: false. For one breath after the crown's judgment, the Ember Chapel forgot how to breathe. Lady Seressa Vane stood beside the altar. One gloved hand pressed to her crimson veil. She made the gesture look frightened, delicate, innocent. But the Ember Crown did not turn away from her. It hovered above Mira Caldris's open hands, black thorns aimed toward the chosen bride, gold fire still blooming along the inner rim where it had touched Mira's skin. Every noble in Auren Dragon Court stared. No one looked at Mira first. They looked at the crown. That was the first insult and the first mercy. For once the court could not pretend a servant girl was the problem before deciding what the magic had seen. Queen Mother Isolde moved before panic could choose its own voice. Contain the altar, she ordered. 4 Ember Guards stepped forward with iron hooks made for handling failed relics. One reached for the crown. The Ember Crown snapped its flames outward. The guard stumbled back, his hook glowing white-hot at the tip. Mira did not move. The crown still held her there without chains, without hands, without permission. Yet its heat did not feel like a threat. It circled her wrists, as if guarding the pulse beneath her skin. Vaelor descended another step from the ash throne. No one touches it. Isolde turned to him, perfectly composed. Your Majesty, the crown has been corrupted by servant blood. Mira laughed once. It came out quiet, but the chapel heard it. Isolde's eyes sharpened. You find this amusing, no, Mira said. Only familiar. Vaelor looked at her. Familiar. She met his gaze across the altar. When poor blood is needed, the court calls it lawful. When poor blood survives, the court calls it corruption. A murmur moved through the noble benches. Lady Seressa's lashes trembled behind the veil. I did nothing. I only stood where I was told. The crown hissed softly. Mira saw Seressa's gloved fingers tighten again near the veil's edge, touching that hidden place beneath it. Vaelor saw it too. For the first time, his attention left the crown and fixed on the bride his court had protected. Remove your veil, he said. Seressa went still. Isolde stepped between them. That is not required by the first crown flame. Neither is the crown calling her false. The crown has been disturbed. By Mira, he said. Mira hated that her name sounded different when he said it now. Not tender, not yet, but no longer procedural. Still, a name spoken after the fire chose her did not erase the paper he had signed before it. Isolde heard the shift and smiled as if forgiving him for a childish impulse. My son dragon relics react violently to improper vessels. The servant touched what she was never meant to hold. That is all. Mira looked down at the Ember Crown. Gold light moved through it like something waking from beneath old ash. Then why is it still holding me? No one answered quickly. That silence belonged to her. Vaelor's jaw tightened. Bring the substitution record. Isolde's expression did not change, but the temperature of the chapel seemed to fall. The record has already been approved. By whose hand? By law. Law does not hold a pen, mother. The court went very still. Mira watched him carefully. This was not repair. Not yet. Repair would have looked like the order being torn before her body was offered to flame. This was only the first crack in the room that had decided she was cheaper than Lady Seressa. But cracks mattered when a woman had been sealed inside one. An ash scribe hurried forward with a black folder pressed to his chest. His hands shook as he opened it before the altar. Vaelor took the top page. Mira saw the moment he read the words again. Debt-cleared servant substitute. Not bride. Not woman. Not Mira Caldris. His face hardened, but not with anger at her. At himself. At the page. At whoever had made cruelty look orderly enough for a king to sign. Isolde spoke softly. The court cannot function if every old procedure is treated as a personal wound. Mira's eyes lifted. It was personal when you put me in the gown. Vaelor looked at her then, and guilt moved openly across his face. She did not soften. You saw the knife, she said. You still called the handle lawful. The words struck him before the court. Good. Let them see him bleed without blood. Isolde's voice cooled. Remove the substitute before she poisons the king against his own throne. 2 guards stepped toward Mira. Vaelor moved first. Dragonfire flared at his throat as he crossed the marble and placed himself between Mira and the guards. Do not touch her. The chapel froze. Mira looked at his back. Broad. Armored. Too late. Her voice was low enough that only he heard it. Stopping them now does not undo that you let them bring me here. His shoulders tightened. No, he said, it does not. That answer cost him less than he owed, but more than she expected. The Ember Crown rose higher. Its gold flame thinned into a sharp line pointing from Mira to Lady Seressa. Then the crown's inner fire opened like an eye. Seressa stepped back. Isolde's hand closed around her wrist. Too fast. Too familiar. Vaelor saw it. Mother. The crown burned brighter. A thin ribbon of gold fire shot toward Seressa's veil and wrapped around the hidden clasp beneath her throat. The crimson fabric did not burn. Instead, a black mark surfaced beneath it, drawn across Seressa's skin like an oath written in borrowed blood. The scribe dropped the record. Mira felt the crown pulse against her hands. Then the Ember Crown spoke again, not to the court, not to Vaelor, but to the protected bride. Blood sworn, not born. Lady Seressa made a small sound behind her veil. Not a scream, a mistake. The kind of sound a protected woman made when the lie protecting her suddenly spoke louder than she did. The Ember Crown hovered between Mira Caldris and the chosen bride, its gold fire narrowed into a burning line. The black mark beneath Seressa's throat pulsed once, then faded beneath the crimson veil, as if trying to hide again. Queen Mother Isolde released Seressa's wrist slowly. Too slowly. Vaelor saw it. Mira saw him see it. That should have meant something. In another world, perhaps it would have. In this one, she stood at an altar in a borrowed gown because truth in Auren Dragon Court never mattered until fire repeated it. Vaelor's voice lowered. What oath? Seressa looked toward Isolde before she answered. The movement was small, the damage was not. Isolde stepped forward with a mother's poise and a judge's eyes. A bride oath, nothing more. Noble houses often seal their daughters to preserve purity before royal marriage. The Ember Crown hissed. Mira looked at it. It does not sound like purity. A few nobles turned toward her with offended faces, as if the servant girl had been rude to the lie, instead of the lie being rude to her body. Isolde's smile cooled. Careful, child. The crown has not named you queen. It has only failed to consume you. Mira's fingers tightened under the crown's heat. That seems to disappoint you. Vaelor looked at his mother. Answer plainly. Was Seressa's blood altered? Seressa whispered. Your Majesty, I was told it was only protection. The chapel shifted. There it was. Told. Not blessed. Not born. Told. Isolde turned to her with such elegant warning that Seressa lowered her eyes at once. Vaelor's dragonfire brightened under his throat. Told by whom? No one answered. The crown did. Its inner flame bent downward toward the fallen substitution record. The black folder snapped open on the marble. Pages lifted one by one, turning in a wind no window had invited. Mira watched the pages flash past. Bride law. First, crown flame, debt transfer. Substitute body. Her stomach tightened. Vaelor stepped closer to the record. Stop. The pages stopped. Not at Lady Seressa's name. At Mira's. Her name appeared halfway down a narrow sheet stamped with the Queen Mother's private seal. Mira Caldris. Below it in smaller ink, eligible servant vessel. Debt line retained until marriage trial. For a moment, Mira did not understand the sentence. Then she did. Her debt had never been meant to end. All those years, she had counted copper wages. All those winters, she had taken extra shifts in the ash laundries until her hands cracked from dragon soap. All those nights she had gone without supper because every coin she earned was marked against a number that never shrank. She had not been paying her way out. She had been paying rent on the cage they built around her. It had not been debt. It had been a leash. Vaelor read the line once. Then again. His face changed in a way Mira had not seen before. Not shock. Recognition of harm with his own name standing too close to it. He looked at Isolde. You kept her in debt for this. Isolde's voice remained soft. The court keeps many servants under obligation. Do not make one girl into a tragedy because the crown behaved strangely. Mira laughed under her breath. One girl. A tragedy became smaller when spoken by the person who arranged it. Vaelor turned to her. Did you know? Mira looked at him across the gold-lit altar. That I was being saved for a ritual death, no, your majesty. I was too busy trying to pay for a freedom your court never intended to sell me. The words struck him. Good. Let them. Seressa's veil trembled. I did not know it would be her. Mira's eyes moved to her. But you knew it would be someone. Seressa's mouth parted. No answer came. The Ember Crown burned brighter. Isolde lifted her chin. Enough. The substitute is attempting to turn a lawful debt transfer into emotional theater. Mira looked at the court. Was my life less lawful before your ledger needed it? No one answered. Vaelor bent and picked up the page. Isolde's eyes sharpened. Do not touch sealed bridal law without council witness. Vaelor held the record up for the chapel to see. This page names her before today. Murmurs moved through the nobles. He read aloud, voice roughening with every word. Eligible servant vessel. Debt line retained until marriage trial. The chapel went cold. Mira felt something inside her loosen and break at once. For years, she had thought poverty had trapped her. Now she knew someone had been turning the key from the other side. Vaelor looked at her, and there was apology in his eyes. She refused to receive it. Do not look at me as if pain becomes smaller when you finally notice it, she said. His hand closed around the page. No, he said. It becomes mine to answer for. It was not enough. But it was the first sentence he had spoken that did not hide behind law. Isolde moved immediately to bury it. Your Majesty, this is exactly why substitute bride law exists. Servants with unstable blood, unstable loyalties, and unstable resentment cannot be permitted to interpret sacred flame. The crown turned toward her. Gold fire vanished for one breath. Black heat rolled through the chapel. Mira felt the crown's weight settle lower over her hands. Then the altar beneath the record cracked. A thin line of ember light opened in the stone, forming letters that burned into the floor at Mira's feet. Prepared before the bride was chosen. Vaelor went still. Isolde did too. Mira looked down at the words and the room seemed to tilt around her. Before Lady Seressa. Before the ceremony. Before Vaelor's order. Before anyone had told Mira she was being used. The Ember Crown had found what the court had buried. Mira lifted her eyes to Isolde. How long? For the first time, Isolde did not answer quickly. For the first time, Isolde looked not offended, but interrupted. The crown answered for her. The altar split wider. Inside the stone beneath the first record, another page rose in gold flame. This one was older, 13 years older. Mira's childhood name was already written on it. Mira knew that name before she could read it. Her mother had whispered it once through fever, then begged her never to repeat it near the chapel walls. The record did not call her queen. That was almost worse. It called her usable. And beneath that name in Isolde's private hand was one word. Reserved. The word on the old record changed the chapel more than fire had. Reserved. It burned beneath Mira Caldris's childhood name in Isolde Auren's private hand, neat and black and terrible, as if a little girl's life had once been folded into a royal cabinet and stored for later use. Mira could not move. The Ember Crown hovered above her palms, gold fire bending toward the page as if forcing the court to look where it had trained itself not to see. Vaelor stared at the old record, read it aloud. No scribe moved. Queen Mother Isolde turned slowly, her face composed again. That record predates your reign. I did not ask its age. It is sealed servant property. Mira's head lifted. The words reached somewhere older than the gown, older than the debt, older than the altar beneath her feet. Property. Her mother's fevered voice came back to her in pieces. A dark room behind the ash laundries, a hand trembling over Mira's mouth. A whispered name Mira had been too young to understand, and old enough to know she must fear. Never say it near chapel walls. Never let them know you remember. Mira looked at Isolde. A child's name is not property. Isolde's eyes softened in that awful public way. A child born into court debt belongs first to the court that feeds her. The nobles accepted the sentence too easily. That was the sickness of Auren Dragon Court. Cruelty did not need to shout if it had been written into law long enough. Vaelor descended from the altar step and faced the ash scribes. Read the page. One older scribe bowed so low his forehead almost touched the marble. Your Majesty, the Queen Mother's seal forbids Vaelor's dragonfire flashed black gold at his throat. My crown commands it. Isolde smiled faintly. Careful, my son. You are using power to disturb lawful preservation. Preservation, Mira said. Is that what you call keeping a child ready for a ritual? Isolde turned to her. I call it preventing chaos from devouring a kingdom. The Ember Crown pulsed. The page rose higher in gold flame. The scribe swallowed and read. Minor female. Recorded under lower servant custody. Childhood designation sealed. Ember response suspected. Deadline to be retained. Marriage release prohibited. The chapel went cold. Mira heard the words, but for a moment they did not become meaning. Then they did. Every coin she had earned. Every debt mark renewed. Every overseer who said one more year. Every door that almost opened and then closed. None of it had been accident. Her whole life had not been poor. It had been arranged. She looked at Isolde. You did not find me today. Isolde did not answer. Mira stepped closer to the old page. You kept me. Seressa made a small movement beside the altar. Mira turned her head. The noble bride had gone pale beneath her crimson veil. Her gloved fingers hovered at her throat, where the hidden blood oath mark had burned moments before. You knew, Mira said. Seressa's lips parted. I knew there was a vessel. The words struck harder than servant. Vaelor's face darkened. Mira's voice stayed low. And did they tell you vessels have mothers? Names hands that crack in ash water. Beds in rooms cold enough to make breathing hurt. Seressa looked away. The Ember Crown hissed. Isolde lifted one hand. Enough. Lady Seressa is the lawful chosen bride. She was protected according to old crown protocol. She was protected by my life, Mira said. No, Isolde said. She was protected by order. Vaelor looked at his mother. Order built on a girl you kept trapped. A girl with dangerous ember compatibility. The phrase landed. The Ember Crown burned brighter, as if pleased that the room had finally been forced near truth. Vaelor's voice sharpened. Bring the servant debt ledgers. Isolde's composure tightened. This is a bridal trial, not an accounting hearing. It became an accounting hearing when my court used debt as a chain. Mira looked at him. She did not thank him. She would not praise the king for noticing the cage after the crown had set it on fire. Vaelor seemed to understand. He did not look to her for comfort. He looked to the guards. Bring every ledger attached to Mira Caldris, every renewal, every transfer, every seal. The guards hesitated. Isolde said softly, If you open those ledgers, you open the foundation of the lower court. Vaelor answered. Then perhaps the lower court was built where no foundation should stand. A murmur shook the chapel. The Ember Crown dropped lower over Mira's hands. Its gold fire poured onto the old record, burning away the polite lines and leaving only the hidden ones. New words appeared beneath reserved. Ember compatible. Debt retained. Do not release. Mira could not breathe for a moment. Not because she was weak, because a woman could survive hunger, cold, and insult by telling herself tomorrow might belong to her. The court had stolen even tomorrow. Vaelor looked at the words as if they were blades laid at his feet. Who authorized this? The page turned by itself. No hand touched it. The Ember Crown forced one final line to the surface, older than the others buried under ash ink and Queen Mother seal. Isolde stepped forward. Do not read that. Mira looked at her. For the first time, Isolde sounded less like a ruler and more like someone guarding a door. The crown answered anyway. One hidden word burned beneath Mira's childhood name. Origin. The chapel did not understand the hidden word at first. It burned under Mira Caldris's childhood name, small and gold, but it carried more weight than any crown in the room. Origin, not debt, not service, not substitute. Origin. Mira stared at it until the letters blurred. Her whole life had been written in other people's hands. Debt tallies, work rosters, punishment marks, kitchen rotations, chapel cleaning orders. A room assignment in the lower wing where frost gathered inside the window during winter. But Origin was different. Origin meant there had been a beginning before the court renamed her Useful. Queen Mother Isolde's voice returned smooth and cold. Extinguish the page. No one moved. Vaelor did. He stepped between Isolde and the old record, black gold dragonfire, brightening beneath his throat. No, the word was quiet. It still changed the room. Isolde looked at him as if he had placed a blade on his own throne. You do not understand what you are interrupting. Then explain it. This is sealed origin law. Mira lifted her eyes. My life has many names when you want to lock it away. Isolde turned to her. You were a child under court custody. The court had the right to preserve dangerous uncertainty. Preserve, Mira asked. You kept me, poor renamed, and waiting for fire. Lady Seressa shifted beside the altar. Queen Mother, perhaps we should withdraw until the crown settles. The Ember Crown snapped toward her. Seressa froze. Mira saw the fear behind the crimson veil. Not fear for Mira. Fear that the same fire which had exposed her blood oath might decide it had more to say. Vaelor saw it too. Seal the chapel doors, he ordered. The guards hesitated. Isolde's eyes sharpened. You would imprison your own court during a bridal rite. I would keep every witness in the room until the truth stops being moved, before it can be read. The guards shut the gold doors. The sound echoed like a verdict. Mira looked at Vaelor, and for a moment she wanted to hate him cleanly. It would have been easier if he were only cruel. But he stood now against the woman who had raised him against the law he had used against the ceremony built to make Mira disposable. It did not undo the gown. It did not undo his signature. Do not stand in front of the door and call it protection, she said. You still signed the road that brought me here. Vaelor's face tightened. I know. Knowing is not repair. No, he said, but denial would be another wound. She had no answer ready for that. Isolde stepped forward before silence could give him ground. Your Majesty the servant is manipulating your guilt. That is what unstable vessels do. They survive flame, then believe survival makes them sacred. The Ember Crown lowered its thorns, glowing. Mira did not look away from Isolde. I never asked to be sacred. I asked to be free. The words reached the servants standing at the chapel edges. Ashmaids, candle boys, debt-marked laundresses. Faces that knew exactly how freedom became a word. Rich people praised, while poor people paid for it forever. Vaelor turned to the nearest scribe. Bring the origin ledgers. The scribe's face went bloodless. Your Majesty, those are held under Queen Mother seal. Then bring them sealed. Isolde's voice dropped. Do not do this. For the first time, she sounded less like a judge and more like a mother, warning a son away from a locked room. Vaelor looked at her. Were you ever going to tell me what she was? Mira flinched at the word. What? Vaelor caught it. His expression changed at once. Who, he said, correcting himself before she could. Who she was. Mira hated that the correction mattered. Isolde noticed that too. A servant scribe entered, with a narrow iron case carried in both hands. 3 seals marked it Dragon, Court, Bride, Law, and Queen Mother authority. Vaelor reached for it. The seals burned black. The scribe staggered back. Only the one who authorized the preservation can open it. Isolde extended her gloved hand. At last, the law remembers its keeper. The Ember Crown flared. Gold fire shot from Mira's palms to the iron case, wrapping around the seals like living thread. The case did not open. Instead, the fire turned toward Vaelor. His signet ring darkened. Mira understood before the court did. The crown was asking for his mark. The same mark that had signed her substitution order. Vaelor looked at the blackening ring. Then, at Mira. She said nothing. She would not ask him for sacrifice. She would not make his courage easier by needing it aloud. Vaelor pulled the ring from his finger. Isolde's face hardened. If you break royal signet authority during a crown flame, every decree you signed under it can be challenged. Vaelor held the ring above the Ember Crown. Good. The chapel went silent. He dropped the signet into the crown's gold fire. Black gold flame erupted. Vaelor's hand clenched pain, cutting across his face as the fire burned the old royal mark from the ring. He did not pull back. Mira watched him suffer without softening. But she watched. The iron case opened. Inside lay a thin origin ledger bound in pale ember leather. The pages turned by themselves until they reached an entry sealed 13 years ago. The Ember Crown forced the words into the air. Recovered female child. False name assigned. Debt chain approved. Ember response confirmed. Mira's breath stopped. Vaelor's voice came rough. False name. The page burned brighter. Isolde whispered enough. But the crown was not finished. A final line appeared beneath the entry. Original bloodline withheld by order of Queen Mother Isolde Auren. Mira looked at Isolde. Vaelor did too. Then the Ember Crown opened like a dragon eye and spoke to the whole chapel. Ask her what blood she stole. The Ember Crown's question did not sound like accusation. That made it worse. Ask her what blood she stole. The words hovered over the altar in gold fire, while every noble in the Ember Chapel turned toward Queen Mother Isolde Auren. Isolde did not flinch. A woman like her had spent decades teaching fear to wear jewelry. She lifted her chin, black gold robes falling smooth around her, as if the crown had merely made a social error. The relic speaks in old metaphors. Mira Caldris almost laughed. Old metaphors had never kept her hands raw in ash water. Old metaphors had never renewed her debt. Old metaphors had never dressed her in another woman's wedding gown and walked her toward flame. Vaelor stood beside the opened origin ledger, his burned signet ring still smoking in the Ember Crown's fire. Pain had paled his face, but he did not hide his hand. Answer it, he said. Isolde's eyes moved to him. You are asking your mother to defend herself before servants. No, Vaelor said. I am asking the woman who controlled the court records to answer before the bride she tried to spend. Mira looked at him, not softened. Listening, there was a difference. Lady Seressa Vane took one careful step back from the altar. The crown followed her with one blackened thorn. Seressa stopped. Isolde noticed and smiled faintly as if gathering the room again. Very well. If the court demands history, let it hear history. There was once a bloodline before Auren stabilized the dragon throne. A dangerous line, unruled fire. Women who survived crown flame but could not be trusted to govern what answered them. Mira's fingers went cold beneath the crown's warmth. Vaelor's voice dropped. What bloodline? Isolde looked at Mira. Caldris. The chapel changed around the name, not loudly. A shift of breath, a tightening of noble mouths. A few older counselors looking down too quickly, as if memory had become unsafe. Mira heard her own name differently then, not because it gave her power, because it proved the court had known it meant something, while treating it as nothing. Isolde continued calm and precise. The Caldris line nearly burned Auren apart generations ago. My duty was to ensure no unstable ember blood returned to influence the throne. Mira's voice came low. So you hid a child in debt. I preserved a dangerous inheritance. You sold me as a servant. I protected the realm. The Ember Crown flared so sharply that the basin cracked beneath it. Vaelor stepped closer to the origin ledger. Read the next line. The ash scribe stared at the page, shaking. Your Majesty, read it. The scribe swallowed. Last confirmed Caldris female recovered from Lower East ruins. Renamed under servant registry. Debt chain approved until crown need. The words struck Mira one by one. Recovered. Renamed. Debt chain. Crown need. Her mother had not whispered the old name because she was mad with fever. She had whispered it because she had been trying to give Mira back something before the court finished stealing it. Mira looked at Isolde. My mother knew. Isolde's face remained smooth. Your mother was sentimental. What did you do to her? Vaelor turned sharply to Isolde. The Queen Mother's eyes cooled. Careful, girl. Grief makes servants reckless. Mira stepped forward, despite the crown's fire. What did you do to my mother? For one moment, no one moved. Then Lady Seressa spoke very softly. She was not supposed to remember. Mira turned to her. Seressa went still, as if the words had escaped without permission. Vaelor's expression darkened. What did you just say? Seressa's gloved hand rose to her throat again. I was told the vessel had no living memory attached to the blood. I was told the debt line had cleaned the name. Mira stared at her, cleaned, as if her mother's voice had been dirt. The Ember Crown turned black. Isolde's hand snapped around Seressa's wrist. Silence. No, Vaelor said. One word, one command. This time the guards obeyed him, and not her. Isolde released Seressa. Vaelor looked at his chosen bride. What was your blood oath made? From Seressa's lips trembled. I do not know. The crown hissed. Gold fire cut across the air and struck the crimson veil at Seressa's throat. The hidden mark surfaced again, black and twisted, and beneath it a thin line of stolen ember glowed. Mira felt the pulse in her own wrists answer. She understood then. Not everything. Enough. My blood, she whispered. Seressa shook her head. I never touched you. No, Mira said. You only wore what they took from my name. The crown opened wider its thorns, unfolding like dragon wings. The origin ledger burned through another seal. New words formed above the altar. Caldris ember used to stabilize Vane bridal oath. The chapel erupted into whispers. Vaelor looked at Seressa, then at Isolde. and something in him seemed to go very still. You made her acceptable to the crown by binding her oath to Mira's bloodline. Isolde's voice hardened. I made a queen the court could survive. You made a lie. I made order. Mira laughed once, and the sound hurt. You keep saying order as if it becomes clean, when enough women bleed quietly underneath it. The Ember Crown lowered toward her, not consuming, bowing. Isolde's composure cracked at the edges. Do not let it crown her. Mira looked at the crown, then at Vaelor. If it crowns me because you need a cleaner bride, she said, I will tear it from my own head. Vaelor's face tightened. I will not ask you to wear what harmed you. Then start by asking what else your mother built from my life. The origin ledger answered before he could. Its final sealed page opened in flame. Across the page, older than Auren law, one sentence burned in gold. The first Ember Crown was made for Caldris blood. For several breaths, no one in the Ember Chapel dared speak. The sentence the crown had revealed hung above the altar in gold flame, older than Auren law, and sharper than any blade. The first Ember Crown had not been made for the throne. It had been made for the bloodline the throne had buried. Mira Caldris stood beneath that burning truth in Lady Seressa's borrowed wedding gown, her hands still held open beneath the hovering crown. The gold fire around her wrists no longer looked like a test. It looked like recognition. Queen Mother Isolde recovered first. Close the ledger, she said. No one moved. Her voice hardened. Close it. Vaelor turned to the scribes. Leave it open. Isolde looked at him with quiet fury. You are letting a servant relic unmake royal order. Mira's head turned. Servant relic, Isolde did not blink. Caldris blood was never meant to rule. It was meant to anchor crown fire. That is the difference between origin and authority. The nobles absorbed that quickly, almost gratefully. Mira saw it happen. They were frightened by the truth, but relieved when Isolde gave them a way to keep looking down at her. She was not a sacrificed girl now. Not exactly. She was something older, something useful, something the court could rename again, if allowed enough time. Vaelor saw it too. No one will call her an anchor, he said. Mira looked at him. You do not get to decide what they call me, only after the crown refuses to let me die. His face tightened. The words hurt him. Good. They had earned the right to. Lady Seressa's voice trembled behind the veil. I did not know the crown was made for her blood. Mira looked at her. But you knew my life was being used to protect yours. Seressa lowered her eyes. The Ember Crown hissed low and disappointed. Vaelor stepped toward Mira. I will have the ledgers opened. All of them. Every debt transfer. Every bride substitution. Every seal my mother used. Mira held his gaze. And what will that make me? He stopped. She gave him no mercy. A bride your court can finally admit is valuable. A bloodline your throne suddenly needs. A woman you can protect now because protecting me serves the crown. No, he said, voice rough. It will make the court answer. The court has always known how to answer, Mira said. It just never answered to women like me. Silence followed. Then the Ember Crown lowered toward her hair. The chapel inhaled. Isolde stepped forward fast. Do not let it crown her. Vaelor's dragon fire flared. Do not touch her. But Mira moved before either of them could claim the moment. She pulled her hands away. The crown stopped. Gold flame flickered in the space between her and the throne, confused for the first time since it had woken. Mira stepped back from the altar. No. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. The crown hovered waiting. Vaelor stared at her. Mira. She hated how much softer her name sounded now. You do not get to look relieved, she said. Not because the crown chose me instead of killing me. I am not relieved. Yes, you are. Her voice stayed steady, though something inside her trembled. Because if the crown chooses me, then maybe your mistake becomes destiny. Maybe the gown becomes fate instead of cruelty. Maybe the court can call me queen and never admit it first, called me disposable. Vaelor went pale. Isolde smiled faintly, finding advantage even in the wound. You see your majesty unstable, ember blood. She rejects sacred recognition because resentment has made her unfit. Mira turned on her. No. I reject being used twice. The Ember Crown burned brighter. Not angry, proud. Mira reached for the pearl clasp at her throat and tore it free. The borrowed gown loosened at her shoulders. Gasps moved through the chapel, but she did not undress, did not expose herself, did not let them turn dignity into spectacle. She only stripped away the noble veil, pinned over her servant grey beneath. White ember silk fell open enough to show the plain ash linen dress hidden under it. The court saw both at once. The bride they made her pretend to be. The servant they had never stopped seeing. Mira looked at Vaelor. Open your ledgers. Burn your laws. Name the women who died in this chapel. Do that before you ask me to stand here again. Vaelor's hand closed at his side. Where will you go? Back to the lower wing, she said. To the women who would have been next. Isolde's eyes narrowed. If you leave this altar, you abandon the crown's recognition. Mira looked at the Ember Crown. It hovered above the basin, gold fire trembling. No, she said. I stopped the court from turning recognition into another chain. She walked past Vaelor. He reached once, then stopped before touching her. That restraint hurt worse than possession would have, because it proved he was finally learning the shape of what he had lost. Mira, he said quietly, I will not ask you to forgive this. She paused without turning. Good. Start by making sure no one else has to survive it. Then she left the Ember Chapel. The crown did not follow at first. It waited until the gold doors began to close behind her. Then every flame in the chapel turned black. Lady Seressa cried out. The nobles stumbled back. The Ember Crown rose above the altar, cold and dark, and refused the throne. Black flame is harder to ignore than screams. By the time Mira Caldris reached the lower wing, every servant in Auren Dragon Court already knew something had gone wrong in the Ember Chapel. The ash laundry women stood in doorways with wet sleeves and frightened faces. Kitchen girls held trays they had forgotten to deliver. Candle boys stared at Mira's borrowed gown hanging half loose over her plain ash linen dress. No one asked if she was queen. That was why she could breathe there. An older laundress named Yara touched Mira's sleeve. Did they burn you? Mira looked down at her own hands. The skin was unmarked. The injustice was not. No, she said. The crown remembered me. Yara's face changed. Not joy. Fear with a small, impossible edge of hope. Behind Mira, far above the chapel, bells began to toll again. Not trial bells this time. Record bells. Every servant in the lower wing went still. Mira turned toward the sound. What is he doing? In the Ember Chapel, Vaelor Auren stood before a court, lit only by the black fire of the refusing crown. The Ember Crown hovered above the altar, cold and dark, its thorns angled toward the ash throne as if the throne itself had become unworthy. Queen Mother Isolde stood beside the bride Lord dais, one hand closed around the edge of her black gold sleeve. End this embarrassment, she said. Recall the servant girl. Force the crown to complete recognition. Vaelor did not look at her. No. Lady Seressa's voice trembled. Your Majesty, if the crown refuses the throne, the court will blame me. Vaelor turned toward her. The court protected you by feeding another woman to fire. Seressa lowered her eyes. I did not write the law. No, Vaelor said. You only stood behind it. The words landed not cruelly, but cleanly. Isolde stepped forward. If you turn on Lady Seressa now, you insult every noble house that trusted Auren bride law. Vaelor faced the nobles. Good. Let every house hear why it should be insulted. A murmur broke through the benches. He turned to the guards. Bring the substitute bride ledgers. Isolde's voice sharpened. Those records are sealed. Everything sealed to hide a body opens tonight. The chapel stilled. Vaelor looked to the ash scribes. Ring the record bells. Summon the lower wing, the debt office, and every keeper of servant law. One scribe whispered, Your Majesty, servants are not permitted in full bridal court. Vaelor's eyes burned. They were permitted to die for it. No one moved after that. The doors opened. Records came first. Iron cases, black folders, bride debt books, substitute consent scrolls, too clean to have ever known consent. Then came the lower wing servants, hesitant and silent, stepping into a chapel where many had scrubbed floors, but none had been allowed to stand as witnesses. Mira came last. Not because Vaelor sent for her, because the women behind her did not move until she did. When she entered the Ember Crown, gave one pulse of gold. Only one. Then it went dark again. Vaelor saw her. For a breath, everyone did. Mira stopped beneath the high arch, refusing the altar, refusing the throne, refusing the gown's borrowed meaning. Isolde smiled faintly. There. The vessel returns. Vaelor's voice cut through the chapel. Say that again, and I will enter vessel into the record as a word used by the Queen Mother to disguise sacrifice. Isolde went still. Mira looked at him. She did not smile. Good, he thought. Do not make this easy for me. He opened the first ledger himself. The pages were brittle, old, and marked by bride flame. He read the first entry aloud. Substitute bride, lower ash wing. Debt cleared, after crown service. He paused. There was no name, only a number. Mira's face hardened. Vaelor turned the page. Another number, then another, then another. His voice roughened. Where are their names? Isolde answered calmly. Names were removed to preserve family dignity. Mira spoke from the arch. Whose dignity no noble answered. The Ember Crown pulsed. Vaelor looked at the scribes, searched the debt ledgers beside each number. They worked with shaking hands. One scribe found the match first. Number 7 was Auren Marrow, kitchen debt, age 19. A servant woman covered her mouth. Another scribe whispered, Number 8, Saria Denville, laundry debt, age 23. The lower wing began to tremble, not with fear now, but with recognition. Names came out of the ledgers one by one. Women who had vanished after cleaning assignments. Women said to have been transferred. Women whose beds had been stripped before dawn. Vaelor read until the court could no longer pretend substitute bride law had been a ritual. It had been a machine. Isolde's voice turned low. You will destroy public trust in the crown. Vaelor looked at the dark Ember Crown. No, I am learning why it stopped trusting us. He carried the oldest bride law book from the dais and placed it on the chapel floor between the nobles and the servants. Then he looked at Mira. I will not ask you to stand beside me, he said. I will not ask you to make my repair look noble. Mira's fingers tightened around the torn wedding silk. Vaelor set his burnt signet hand on the law book. Dragonfire rose beneath his palm. The cover split. From inside the book, a hidden page unfolded in black flame. At the top, written in Isolde's private hand, was a title no one in Auren Court had ever spoken aloud. List of acceptable losses. No one in the Ember Chapel spoke after the hidden title appeared. List of acceptable losses. The words burned in black flame above the bride law book, and for the first time that night, even the nobles seemed to understand that the ritual had never been sacred by accident. It had been designed. Mira Caldris stepped forward before Vaelor could read another name. Not because he needed help, because the dead did. The lower wing women behind her shifted, afraid to follow, but afraid to let her stand alone. Mira felt them at her back like a breath she had never been allowed to have. Vaelor looked at her. You do not have to touch that book. Mira stopped beside the law book and met his eyes. I know. That mattered. Not enough to forgive him. Enough to continue. Queen Mother Isolde's smile returned, thin and poisonous. How moving. The servant girl approaches her own proof and mistakes it for power. Mira looked down at the black flame title. No, I know proof is not power. Women like me have carried proof for generations. The powerful only call it truth when it starts burning their hands. The Ember Crown pulsed once above the altar. Vaelor's burned hand closed at his side. He did not interrupt. Mira knelt before the law book. Not to the throne, not to the crown, to the names still trapped inside it. Read them, she said. Vaelor's voice came low. All of them. Mira looked at him. Every woman your court decided could disappear. The chapel turned cold. Isolde stepped forward. This is grotesque. These families do not need their shame paraded before bridal court. Mira's head lifted. Their shame, the words were quiet enough to frighten. The shame belongs to the people who counted daughters as losses. The lower wing women moved closer. Seressa whispered, if those names are read, the noble houses will turn against the throne. Mira looked at her. They turned against us first. Seressa flinched. Vaelor opened the hidden page. One by one he began to read. Auren Marrow, Saria Denville, Lysa Thorn, Auren Vale, Keitha Morn. Names rose from the book as black sparks, then turned gold when they reached the Ember Crown. With every name spoken, a shadow appeared in the chapel air, a young woman in borrowed silk, a servant in trial white, a frightened face beneath a noble veil. Not ghosts. Records. Remembering bodies. The court could not look away. Mira forced herself to watch everyone. When Vaelor's voice faltered, she did not comfort him. He steadied himself and continued. By the 23rd name, Isolde's calm began to harden into something sharper. Enough, she said. Vaelor kept reading. By the 31st, the Ember Crown lowered from the altar. By the 37th, Lady Seressa sank to her knees, her crimson veil trembling. I did not know there were so many, she whispered. Mira looked at her. You only needed there to be one. Seressa covered her mouth. The crown hovered before Mira Goldfire, turning slowly inside its thorns. A voice came from it, not loud, but old enough to silence the chapel. Choose the fire. Every noble inhaled. Isolde's eyes flashed. Do not answer. Mira almost smiled. That is the first honest thing you have said all night. She stood. The borrowed white gown fell around her in torn folds over the ash linen dress beneath. One made her look like the court's bride. The other reminded them what they had bought. The Ember Crown drifted toward her brow. Vaelor took one step, then stopped himself. Mira noticed. So did Isolde. You are finally wise enough not to reach, Mira said. Vaelor's throat worked. I am trying to become wise enough to deserve being near you. The words entered the room softly. Mira did not let them change her face. Then listen, she said. Do not ask the crown for me. Do not ask the court to accept me. Do not ask me to turn survival into gratitude. I will not. She turned to the Ember Crown. If you want my blood, Mira said, you will not have it to decorate the same law that fed on women before me. The crown's fire brightened. Isolde's voice sharpened. You cannot bargain with the Ember Crown. Mira looked at her. You did. You just used other women as the price. The chapel shook. Mira lifted one hand toward the crown but did not touch it. I will not become queen over substitute bride law, she said. I will not wear a crown that leaves another servant girl waiting in a ledger. Burn the law first. Then ask me again. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the Ember Crown turned away from Mira. It faced the bride law book. Isolde's composure broke. No. Gold fire struck the book. Pages screamed without voices. Seals split. Names flew upward in burning streams. The list of acceptable losses curled, blackened, and vanished. But the final page did not burn. It rose above the flames untouched, older than the law, older than Isolde. At the top, written in the first hand of Auren Court, was a marriage record. The first Dragon Queen of Auren was not born Auren. She was Caldris. The old marriage record rose above the burning law book like a judgment the court had spent generations refusing to read. Gold fire crawled across the page, illuminating words older than Queen Mother, Isolde, older than Vaelor's reign, older than the substitute bride law that addressed poor women for death. The first Dragon Queen of Auren was Caldris. Mira Caldris stood beneath that truth in torn wedding silk and ash linen, and the Ember Chapel fell into a silence too large for lies. Vaelor looked at the record as if it had opened beneath his feet. The Caldris line was not an anchor. The Ember Crown turned toward him. Its fire answered before Isolde could. Origin. Mira closed her eyes once. Not in surrender. In pain. All her life the court had used her name like dirt tracked through servant halls. Caldris had meant debt ash, work-cracked hands, a bed in the lower wing, and a childhood warning whispered through fever. Now the court stared at the same name as if it had always belonged to gold. That almost made her angrier. Isolde stepped forward, face white but controlled. One ancient marriage record does not overturn living law. Mira opened her eyes. No. But the women you burned do. The shadows of the substitute brides still hovered around the chapel. Elian, Saria, Lysa, Ketha, and all the others the court had numbered, before the crown gave them names again. The Ember Crown lowered, until it floated between Mira and Isolde. Vaelor turned to the nobles. Hear the record. Substitute bride law was not created to protect noble blood. It was created to hide that the crown answered to Caldris' blood first. Isolde's voice sharpened. I created order from a dangerous inheritance. You created a machine for feeding servants to fire, Vaelor said, and you signed its last order. The words struck clean. The court waited. Mira waited too. This was where a weaker king would defend himself. Vaelor did not. Yes, he said. I signed it. The chapel stilled. He turned fully toward Mira, not close enough to corner her, not soft enough to ask comfort from the woman he had harmed. I signed a page that called you substitute instead of woman. I let law stand where conscience should have stood. I saw the knife and called the handle lawful. Mira's throat tightened. He had remembered. Good. Let memory hurt him too. Vaelor faced the court again. Before the Ember Crown, before the servants of the lower wing, before the names this court erased, I void the substitution bride law. Isolde moved fast. You cannot void bride law without crown acceptance. Mira stepped toward the burning book, then asked the crown. The Ember Crown opened like a dragon eye. Gold fire struck the law book. This time it did not only burn pages, it burned the hidden roots beneath them. Seals cracked across the chapel walls. Debt marks flared on servant ledgers and vanished. Iron bracelets on lower wing women. snapped open, and fell to the marble one after another. A sob broke from somewhere behind Mira. Then, another. Not grief alone, release. Isolde reached for the crown. The fire turned black. Vaelor caught her wrist before she touched it. No more. She looked at him with cold fury. I kept your throne alive. You kept it fed. The Ember Crown rose above them and cast gold light across Isolde's hands. Black ink surfaced under her skin, forming the old seal she had used. Reserved. Vessel. Debt retained. Acceptable loss. The court saw every word. Seressa sank lower beside the altar. Queen Mother. Isolde turned on her. Do not pretend innocence now. Mira looked at Seressa. No one here is innocent, because someone else wrote the law first. Seressa lowered her head. It was not forgiveness, but it was truth. Vaelor released Isolde only when the guards took her. The Queen Mother did not scream. She did not beg. She looked at Mira, as if hatred was still a crown she could wear. You think this makes you queen? Isolde said. Mira stepped closer. No, she said. It makes me the woman your law failed to consume. The Ember Crown descended toward Mira. The nobles began to kneel. Mira lifted one hand. Do not. The court froze. She looked at them all. Nobles, scribes, guards, servants, Seressa on her knees, Vaelor standing with his burned hand open at his side. You do not get to kneel after watching women disappear and call that honor. You will stand and hear their names first. Vaelor bowed his head. Yes. Then he turned to the scribes. Record every substitute bride by name. Restore every debt-marked family. Return every room, wage, and burial the court stole. If my throne weakens from the truth, then it was never strong. The Ember Crown glowed gold. Only then did it settle not on Mira's head but in her hands. Choice, not claim. Vaelor looked at her. I want you as queen. The chapel went still. Mira held the crown and met his eyes. I know. I have no right to ask today. No, she said. You do not. Pain crossed his face, but he accepted it. Then I will ask the court to become worthy before I ask you for anything. Mira looked down at the crown. Its fire warmed her palms without binding them. I will stay long enough to see the law buried, she said. After that, if this crown still burns for me, I will decide whether Auren deserves my name. Vaelor lowered his head, not as a king claiming a bride, but as a man accepting the distance he had earned. The Ember Crown bloomed gold in Mira's hands. Behind her, the freed women of the lower wing began reading the names of the dead aloud. And for the first time in Auren Dragon Court, a servant woman's name was not a debt, a number, or a sacrifice. It was a law the fire itself obeyed.